Some of Us Are Looking at the Stars by Bleep Bloop, 1990.
Log entry, September 16th, 2046.
We were supposed to be the first colony on Mars, but not its last. Staring at the figures blinking softly on the screen, nobody said a word. Maybe if we... began Terrence, before trailing off hopelessly. I watched it slowly dawn on the 12 members of our expedition. It wasn't possible. If we'd just had a few more weeks, that last resupply would have... But we didn't. Kilo cut Samantha off sharply, but not angrily. I looked out the viewport. The churned ground close to the base slowly giving way to smooth, red emptiness and black sky. The white walkway leading to the nearly finished greenhouse glowed dully. Terrence wordlessly pressed a button on the dashboard. The black screen which loomed over us flicked on, but showed nothing but static. We lost contact with Earth 5 days ago, 2 weeks after the last resupply rocket arrived, and 3 weeks after General Riker had seized Columbus from one of the 3 men claiming to be the President of the United States. At first, we had largely ignored the reports coming in from Earth. Superstorms, international instability, localized wars, and political gridlock were constant before we'd left. And we'd all had our reasons for leaving that increasingly hot and crowded blue dot behind for the thrill of taking part in Operation Phoenix. I remember feeling like the hopes of a whole species were riding on us when I stepped on the gleaming angular spaceship for the first time. The news coming in from control had become increasingly concerning in almost direct proportion to the infrequency with which it arrived. The riots grew and spread, and the images of burning cities, crowds clashing in the streets, and emaciated children lining the highways of America filled our screens. One night, I came in after spending a frustrating day trying to figure out why the potato stems were wilting, to see Samantha sitting in the dark, her eyes wide and face wet, watching images of American aircraft carriers floating up the Hudson as smoke engulfed the New York skyline. We were close, so close. Just a few more materials, a little more time, and we might have made this place self-sustaining. Thomas was the first to do it. We found him the next morning sitting outside with his legs crossed and his helmet open. His eyes were shut and he looked peaceful. He was not the last to choose this option, rather than wait for the life support to give out or the food stores to dwindle. As I slowly grow weaker, I lay on my back looking at the stars. The same stars I glimpsed faintly as a child during the power outages that often swept through the Calcutta slums. I would stare at those bright dots through the overhanging roofs and tangled wires and imagine escaping the urban jungle I grew up in to the stars. Now that I finally had, the jungle had grown to swallow the whole world.
End entry. Log number 136489.
It was the hunger. When the end of civilization came, it wasn't how movies or television portrayed things. There were no lingering vestiges of civility left among the uncontrolled chaos. The self-preservation instinct and human savagery kicked in almost immediately. The ones who owned guns used them. Those who had supplies hoarded them. The weak and ill-prepared for doomsday did not last long. There were no laws anymore. Pacifists, the timid, and the elderly were eliminated within the first couple of weeks. It was the natural order of things. Survival of the fittest immediately manifested itself. It always does. Roving bands of scavengers roamed the crumbling cities and overgrown countryside. There was no honor among the survivors. They hunted for mutual gain, but would instantly turn on each other if the partnership stopped being beneficial. Every soul slept with an eye wide open, and their hand clutched a weapon of choice. To let your guard down was to invite rape, robbery, and death. The careless souls ended up sizzling in a frying pan as the next meal for the desperate and the ruthless. Family units quickly became a thing of the past. Later on, the very idea of a genetically related partnership was such a foreign concept that no one would have believed it was even possible. This societal breakdown could have been blamed on a number of miscellaneous factors, but it was primordial hunger, which pushed humanity back to the Stone Age. The food supply dried up overnight. Farmers ceased to produce pigs, chickens, cattle, and vegetables for the rest of the population. They keep the food for themselves, and that triggered a grocery shortage. Simultaneously, a trucking shortage, a fuel shortage, and the absence of every single commodity needed to supply a modern society finished it off. It didn't take long for the average person to run out of normal food. First came the end of the good stuff, like items sold at supermarkets. Then people moved on to eatable things that were available until they too were fully exhausted. Lastly, the desperate did what the desperate had to do. They resorted to animal food consumption, and then they ate the pets themselves. Hunger is a powerful motivator. Starvation and the gnawing pangs that we are all subject to pushed ordinary citizens into unapologetic cannibalism. The timeline for this was faster than anyone would have believed before. Having Mexican or Chinese food took on an entirely new meaning. There were a few genuine attempts made to resurrect human civility. Governments would rise up and then crumble overnight from fierce resistance. These successful scavengers were too comfortable without society's laws or moral constraints. They developed a savage desire for human flesh and carnal debauchery. These vultures of human sorrow banded together to collapse any effort to bring civilization back. Their assault raids were led to maintain the status quo. Hunger comes in many forms. Not only was there a hunger in their empty bellies, but there was also a ruthless hunger for power. Starman by Time Convergence. I am. As I wander through space and time, reveling in the grasp of the infinite visions of parallel universes pulsating before my sight, I wondered to myself, was this worth it? Was there ever any meaning at all to what I had done? I transported myself to the surface of a large star some 20 billion light years away. As I walked upon its bright facade, admiring the dancing pulses of heat and radiation, I began to ponder about my own existence. It was during a period of great meditation that I preferred to resign myself to beautiful and often hostile environments, as it gave me peace of mind. Nothing else could be there except myself. Amidst the flares, I planted a seed of thought within my head. Existence itself has no meaning. There never was, and there never will be. Purpose and meaning is synthetic. It is something designed to sugarcoat the fact that we are all meaningless beings inhabiting a small region in the vast expanses of the perpetually expanding universe, whose boundaries we will most likely never be able to explore, let alone see. It has been almost 3 billion years since humanity wiped itself out. Nothing was spared, not even the culture or legacy. Of course, small articles of past civilization still exist up to this day. Old graffiti on ruins, tattered homes, fallen monuments. There is not much left, and virtually no one to remember or recognize the existence of such articles. Do I find it sad? I say nay. The death of a concept, you see, is no more relevant to the universe than a dog's perspective to the internal workings of the finest, most complex timepiece a human brain could ever conceive. Perhaps even the death of anything. Ideas, cultures, people, homes, emotions. It is all irrelevant. Petty, ideology-infused concepts, tangible or essential. It doesn't matter, and it never has. Perhaps nihilism is the one truth that is rung straight, even if the now extinct human societies refuse to accept it, labeling it as a pessimistic approach to life. I stood up, levitating myself into space as I bid the mesmerizing luminescence of the star farewell. During the last days of life on Earth, during which there was a pitiful semblance of organization, I managed to establish a meaningful conversation with the last of the inhabitants. One of them was a 13-year-old girl. Her name was 3. I asked her why such a name. It was because her mother believed that the number 3 was a lucky number. Wasn't it supposed to be 7? It didn't matter, but having talked with 3, I had observed that she did not think like everyone else. She knew the truth behind existence, the same truth I had stumbled upon when I began to explore the cosmos. 3 had this blank, 1,000-yard stare in her eyes, as if she had seen everything and yet thought nothing of it. Like a weary, battle-exhausted soldier whose eyes stared back at the empty vastness of the observable universe. 3 affectionately called me Mr. Star, and I found it a most suiting moniker. We would often walk early in the morning, and we would talk about her hobbies and her friends, while I would occasionally surprise her with small magic tricks. To anyone else, it would have been a cheap illusion, but to that girl, whose eyes widened at the sight of dancing pillars of light, it meant the world. Frankly, in an environment of scarceness and ruins, there was not much entertainment to be had. 3's favorite food, perhaps, was mushroom soup. She and a couple of other young individuals would head to the forest, pick their daily harvest of mushrooms, and return home to a haphazard convergence of makeshift homes with the smiling faces of their parents. By night, plumes of smoke would fill the air as flames served to illuminate their small villages, seated amongst roofless, gutted buildings. Days before the rest of humanity ceased to exist, I gave 3 a parting gift. It was a simple wristwatch, and I made it so that it never stopped ticking, continuously running on dark matter. She did not know how to wear one, so I personally slipped it onto her wrist and secured it so that it would not bob or wiggle around. She embraced me, but I was unable to feel anything physically. I had been so for several million years now, but despite the lack of external stimulus, I felt, for the first time in such a long time, a small sense of satisfaction, which is equivalent to how animals, including humans, would interpret as happiness, and a genuine happiness it was. 3 would use her watch to count down the last days of Earth. I watched as a large asteroid rust past the atmosphere, its front burning a vivid, bright orange before finally striking the planet itself. The explosion was spectacular, disintegrating the Earth into large chunks of dull rock. The very concept of destruction itself was natural. It did not have to mean that it was good or bad. I neither enjoyed nor felt despair at destruction, or even creation. It did not have to mean anything. Anything, then, does not have to mean anything. Over the course of 1 billion years, my actions have dulled, and I have been idle. Having traveled countless galaxies, and having seen and experienced the wonders of the universe, I decided to travel across all dimensions, all the way up to the 10th, the last possible dimension, where everything and anything, and thus nothing, is happening simultaneously. Perhaps it was time to restart, and maybe even do things differently this time. Gaining a tachyonic pace, I sped to before anything ever existed. A special, might I call it, paradoxical case of existing in inexistence. A feature unique to the 11th dimension. It was absolutely dark and empty. A void of total nothingness, including dark matter. In a state like this, I carefully created an event horizon surrounding myself so as to not blip into non-existence. I may have just violated the deepest laws of physics, or perhaps, despite the longevity of my existence, had yet to learn all about it. I waited for the first expansion of the known universe, and it was spectacular. Meaningless, of course, but spectacular nonetheless. Everything does not have to have meaning. Even if ultimately there is none, you just exist. You become. You are. Even if I choose to do things differently this time, nothing will alter the outcome of meaninglessness. We are all just a cosmic coincidence. I shall now watch and marvel as the stars and the planets form around me for billions upon billions of years. Did I feel, then, that I was going to be in another cycle of existence, of creation and destruction for an unimaginably long amount of time? Perhaps. Maybe what has kept me so long after what has been the longest amount of time is that I've lost a sense of humanity, or perhaps the ability to sympathize with that sense. I no longer feel, but simply exist, like the universe itself. I am. There is something out there, in the void that separates galaxies, that has set its sights on us. As we are speaking, it's drawing ever closer. It all started when some of the more, we'll call them, spiritually sensitive people started abruptly waking in their sleep and reporting to us the same nightmares every time, of floating alone in space and then getting devoured by something so big it encompassed half of the visible stars. That was dozens of years ago. As they started drawing ever closer, some dreamers started reporting unsettling sensations that would last for weeks. A few reported the same daytime hallucinations of beings that were being described as a mix between beasts and insects, who always stared at the subject just before vanishing. That's when our automated response system started reporting a pattern in medical reports of hallucinations and gave us a warning. We brought some dreamers in and told them to try and focus on them. Try to gather as much information as they could. Every small piece of information could prove useful. Where they were coming from, what they were, how long we had, what they were going to do with us. We got nothing. All we could understand was that we had very little time and that they were going to be our end, if and when they reached us. Any dreamer who tried going any further was met with the same response. A hellish vision of our planet being consumed in minutes, or sometimes even seconds. Those who tried to dive in even deeper went completely insane after just a few seconds of being in their session. We tried administering them everything we could to bring them back to us, but unfortunately we had to terminate them. It's as if they repulsed anyone who tried looking at them by completely burning their brains. Or maybe more simply, their shared energy is too much for a mind to handle. All of this was kept hidden, and only a handful of our leaders even know about this threat at all. We believe that it's best that the wrong people, or even too many people, know about this. For our irrational existential fear might make us destroy ourselves in nuclear fire before they even reach us. A small light of hope, however, comes from the fact that as recently as 5 years ago, multiple dreamers started reporting seeing and feeling what to them was the sacred enemy of them. We gave them a name, unlike them, because we felt these beings were noble enough to deserve one. We call them the Sentinels. Visions of them were usually accompanied by feelings of hope, warmth, and safeness. To top it off, they seem to be coming from the opposite direction relative to them, according to the dreamers. Even with all of this, our dreamers feel like these sentinels are not here to save us, but rather to put an end to them. However, any report of sentinel existence is to be taken with a grain of salt, as we just don't have enough reports to say safely that they exist. Perhaps they don't, and they are just a construct of our minds to ease our fear and give us hope before they come and end us. A painkiller of sorts. We don't know what they are. but we feel we are not their first prey and we will not be their last. This makes it even more unlikely that when they eventually come, we'll be the ones to repel them. But whatever we do, even if it's just praying, then we need to do it quickly. From the reports of increasing dreamer activity in the past 30 years, the trend says it's very likely that we'll see them within our lifetimes. That is, if we can even see them coming at all before they take us. Take care and pray that there is hope. Another Earth by Kafka Lover. My great-grandfather was a pilot. I only knew him through family pictures. A wide smile in front of an airport. A black and white of him disembarking from an old biplane. I always thought I inherited a little bit of him. The myth of the man I never met. It might even have been why I flew too, leaving behind my great-grandfather's uncharted Amazonia for the blue-black emptiness of space. The mission was to find another Earth, a planet that could support our fragile lives for another millennia, another eye blink of time in the lifespan of a universe. I always knew I might not come back, though I didn't have much to come back to. Just a dying world and the bottom of a bottle. Earth, we all knew, couldn't sustain us for long. Factories belched coal and gas and soot into the air for centuries. Denial came first, pointing fingers at old temperature graphs and shouting conspiracy theories about global cooling. Finally, we found ourselves among unmistakable ruin and by force shifted our eyes to the heavens. More life. What was it propelling us forward? I don't think it was truly an estimation that our species deserved to go on. A collective sense of worthiness. Probably nothing more than desperation, a reptilian need for survival. Either way, they built them. The ships that would allow us to rocket into the unknown, refugees on a shore of stars. It's strange flying through space. The moment that I break the atmosphere and emerge into the vast, endless darkness is the moment that I live for again and again. I imagine it's like birth. Or death. It's crossing a veil into another world, filled with a sense of deep possibility and nauseous unease. My cockpit windows fill with black, punctuated with the pinpricks of faraway light. I want to come back only to cross this again. This delicate lace between heaven and earth. I come back every time. My ship, the Ophanum, was one of a dozen sent to possible planets deemed habitable for life. There wasn't time for drones or probes or machines to code a message back in binary that had the slimmest possibility of error. They needed boots on the ground, so I was supposed to sleep for 26 years in a cryo chamber, nestled in the back of my ship. An incubator in the silent womb of space. It wasn't anything more than a pinhead of a chance. My last night on Earth was spent flipping through the same old photographs of my great-grandfather. Windows into a life I could only guess at. My planet was TI-956, Terra Incognita, The last time I saw Earth, the last time I floated upwards away from the dim warmth of the thermosphere, I died to myself. I was gone, and all that was left was the incomprehensible depth of the stars. In Cryosleep, they say, it's almost as if you're not asleep at all. The dreams are so vivid that reality and unreality merge, and you can live in a different life for decades in the chimera of cryo-ether. I wondered what would happen if my systems failed, or my ship collided with an asteroid while I was under. Would I feel it in my dreams? Would I see my sleep world crumble around me? Maybe I would simply be snuffed out, like breath on a flame. The Cryosleep rumors were true. In my dreams, I found myself on a new planet, a planet I called Mirror Earth. I swam for years in oceans of sky, breathed in lungfuls of water. I grasped at handfuls of pale sun, squinted in the blinding light of moonbeams. Sometimes I sat, quiet, as the days rolled backward. But most of all, I marveled at an Earth alive, at the thick throngs of grass, the salty whitecaps of sapphire ocean. It seemed for the first time that I was part of something vibrant, at the center of something bright. I was only distantly aware of another world, like a memory repressed again and again. I woke up to beeping, pushed upwards by the freezing gas expelled as my pod opened. I shook, retched, grasped at a rough blanket I put decades before this moment in a box by my side. This must be it. My planet. I pressed my hands against the thick glass of the window, peering down. It was a pale spot in the darkness, peridot green in the light of a yellow dwarf. When my ship landed in an open field among waves of alien vegetation, I paused, standing at the top of a metal ramp, a bridge between the known and a new world. I didn't even check the atmosphere readings or the oxygen levels. I just took off my helmet and breathed in. I breathed in again and again. I started to walk, peeling off the top of my spacesuit. First, through towering stalks of strange violet heather, then towards the shimmering promise of an ocean in the distance. This world's sun was brighter than on Earth. Or maybe it was the clouds, strangely transparent, like scraps of tulle in the sky. I dipped my hand into a river running through the field, holding my palm up in surprise as the liquid dripped slowly from my fingers in hexagon diamonds. When night fell, ribbons of color spread across the empty sky. This planet's aurora borealis. I slept under a shifting kaleidoscope of light. Finally, back in my ship, I punched in the login to my communications from Earth. The message light had been flashing red since I woke up. Ignored. I thought of the crew at home. 26 years older, faces lined with age and worry. If they were even alive at all. I scrolled through a couple of niceties. You should receive this message 10 years into your journey, 20 years into your journey. Hope you're safe. Until getting to the communications package I needed to complete and send back confirming planet viability. I mechanically filled in the data, recorded my brief findings. The numbers added up to one thing. The plan was to transmit the package back to Earth, then to fill the next decades until more settlers arrive by entering the crychamber again. Maybe going back to my mirror Earth or onto a whole other set of dreams. Sun streamed through my ship's window, embroidered the floor. My Earth was dark, the clouds heavy with acid rain. The news showed rising tides in New York City, oily water lapping at the raised steps of MoMA. I imagined the violet heather here, crushed in black, drooping into exhausted soil. There were 11 other ships out there. 11 other chances. I deleted the numbers and typed a single response. Planet uninhabitable.